Look, I'm not the first guy on YouTube who's done a review for this movie to point out that this movie had an exhausting production history. I mean, delay after delay. And I can't tell you how surreal it is to say out loud that I've seen this movie. The New Mutants follows 5 young mutants trying to escape their paths and save themselves while being held at a secret facility. That's about the most basic synopsis I could give for this film. I don't want to go into too much detail just because obviously this has been in the works for a long time, and I know a lot of people have been waiting a long time to see this, so I don't want to give too many details. But that is just a basic way of putting this movie without getting into too much. But yeah, I've been looking forward to this movie for a while. I was very much on board with this movie from the very first teaser trailer that came out in October of 2017. And I loved the vibes that they were giving off. I loved that we were getting like a horror superhero movie. And as trailers were coming out, I was getting more excited, but then obviously as the delays were happening, I kind of lost my excitement. I mean, I was always interested in anticipating seeing it, but it was just such a long break in between like the trailers and then actually getting to see it. And so it's been a journey, me in this film. This has been a really interesting journey, but I'm going to put all of this aside. I'm going to put all of the production history, everything like that aside, and just critique the film for what it is and from what I got watching it in the theater. So let's talk about it. And I think the first thing that this film does extremely well is that it stands alone really, really well. Like, it doesn't rely on any of the other X-Men films. It doesn't rely on any past knowledge of any X-Men movies. You don't have to watch any X-Men movies going into this. It stands on its own. So anybody that's just like, oh, this looks interesting, can waltz in and understand completely what is going on. But at the same time, there are also connections to the X-Men universe, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But there are connections to the X-Men universe, and so those who are invested into the X-Men lore will understand things and will get a little bit more out of it, but you don't have to have that knowledge to understand what's going on. It stands on its own perfectly, and even though there are things that could possibly lead in the direction of getting a sequel, now that is a stretch, but it, like, even though there is a little bit of that, it stands on its own really, really well. And it's just a great 90-minute watch. It's a very easy watch, honestly. Another thing that I really appreciated about The New Mutants was that it didn't try to be this huge blockbuster like a lot of the other X-Men movies were. It knew what it was, and it stayed grounded. It has a really small cast, and it mainly takes place in one location. And so it creates this feeling a lot like 10 Cloverfield Lane, which has 3 people in its cast and mainly takes place in one location. And it's really effective, and I think New Mutants uses the small scope and the small cast and the small setting to its advantage, and it really creates a nice atmosphere for watching this film. And obviously this is a journey into horror, is probably the best way that I can describe this movie for a superhero film. And when those vibes were coming up, I really, really dug it. Now, something I'll get into in a little bit, the horror vibes aren't always there, and that was something that I was really disappointed with. But when they're there, they work. And with that, there's this focus on overcoming fear and the personal demons we carry around with us. And I think that being the focal point of the movie was terrific. It made for a really interesting story, especially revolving around all the different characters. Now, I think it could have been handled a little bit better. I think they could have done a better job of meshing together, not being so all over the place and disconnected. But I did really like that focus on overcoming fear. There wasn't this huge alien army they had to defeat. There wasn't this menacing supervillain that they had to defeat. It was all about the demons that they carried with them. It was all about overcoming this fear and overcoming it for themselves. It wasn't for other people. It was a personal journey. It was a personal battle that they had to fight and win. And I thought that was a great choice from the writers. I think that created a really great character drama, and also really benefited some of the horror elements as well. A couple of other small things that I think this film does well. I think the cast has great chemistry with each other. I don't think all the performances are the best, and we'll get into that in just a second with the negatives. But I think they play off of each other well, and I also think that the twist that happens about 2/3 into this movie, obviously no spoilers, but I think that works really, really well. It connects itself with a couple of other X-Men films. And I really appreciated that, especially coming from an X-Men fan. I thought it was great. I think the twist really worked. And I wish that it was done a little bit better. I wish they had implemented that more. And I really wish that we could see that come to fruition a little bit more. But, I mean, with everything going on with like the Disney-Fox merger, Disney has their whole other plans for X-Men. And so we probably won't get to see that. But I did like the connection that they made. I thought it worked really well. Now I'm going to talk a little bit on the negatives, some of the things that I didn't think worked as well in the New Mutants. And the first thing that sticks out like a sore thumb is that the first half of this movie moves very, very slowly, aside from like the 2 to 3 minute cold open at the very beginning. They take some time introducing the characters, introducing their powers, introducing their fears, and like the personal journeys that they're each on. And it takes a long time for anything to actually get going, for the plot to move forward. And it was very distracting because I was wanting the plot to kick in. I was wanting more of the story, but it took a long time to really dive into the characters. And I think that they did a good job of establishing these characters, but it takes a long time. And while they do a good job of establishing these characters and making you care about them and giving them great chemistry, there are a couple characters that are really pushed into the background, and I really wanted to see more from those characters. I feel like some of the characters that got pushed to the foreground didn't need to be as much in the foreground, and a couple of the characters that were in the background needed to be pushed more to the focus of the film. And something that I mentioned earlier, I think when the horror vibes are there, it works really, really well, but they don't dip into that as much as I would have wanted it to. When you watch these trailers, it looks like it's for a freaking horror film, but there's not as much of that in this final film, and I really, really wanted that, but it was really disappointing because it felt more like a superhero film, honestly, or a drama than it did a horror movie. And I was really looking forward to having a horror superhero film with the emphasis on the horror, but it didn't do that as much, and I was honestly kind of disappointed in that regard, that we didn't get as much of the horror as I was expecting. And one final little remark that I have is that I don't think all of the actors give super dynamic performances. I think they're fine for their roles, but I really would have loved to see more out of some of them. Some of them just give kind of passable, flat performances. Not bad performances per se, but they don't give the performances that I know they're capable of. So I was really wanting more from some of the actors. While having to wait almost 3 years for this film can seem a little bit disappointing, I think there's enough there to keep you engaged. I had a good time watching it, and I think most people watching it will have a good time. I don't think it's perfect by any means, but it's watchable. I don't have as much of a desire to go back and watch it, unfortunately, but for the watch that I had, for the viewing experience that I had a good time. And I'm going to give the New Mutants a double tap. I will say, watching this in IMAX was a very cool experience. The film is shot in 185, and so it complements the big screen very well. So see it in IMAX if you can. The next movie that I'm going to be reviewing is Tenet, and I am so excited for that film that it's actually coming out, and I'm actually going to get to see it in IMAX. So make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. If you like what I'm doing here, I've got loads more on the way. As I watch new movies, I'm going to be doing reviews for them. So hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and you'll be one of the first ones to know when I upload a new video. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. It truly does mean a lot, you guys watching these reviews. Hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you in the next one.